today we're going to talk about some Necron Playstyles. Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. So in today's video we're going to be talking about some Necron Playstyles. Some of you guys like to play, the slow, steady board control kind of method. Some of you like to go with the strong, pressurizing method. And some of you just like to focus on, dominating the battlefield. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about all these different playstyles that you may be playing, but I thought we'd go through some of these playstyles today. So the playstyles that we're going to be talking about, let me get my list out ready. In fact, first we're going to be talking about the Necrons Identity before we actually begin the playstyles, because we need to be on the same page in terms of what Necrons actually are good at and what they're all about. In terms of the playstyles though, we're going to be talking about the Silvertide Approach. We're going to be, what is the Silvertide Approach? A quick brief rundown of the Silvertide Approach is, mass infantry formations that are overwhelming the midboard in the no man's land. And of course they need to be, sticking around. There's lots of synergy, reanimators and so on. We'll get into that when we're in that chapter. The second one is the Durable Approach. Quite similar but more focused on elite size units. So Canoptic Wraiths are an example. A lot more resilient and a lot more threat at range and within engagement range. I'm also going to be going through a mobility approach, a much faster approach, rapid redeployments, and we've got teleportation tricks, and you're kind of exploiting weaker areas with our speed, and maybe it's because of secondary objectives or just finding a weak spot in your opponent's list. And then the final approach I'm going to go through is the vehicle heavy approach, which is basically all the mechanized firepower that we've got centered around armor. There will be synergy involved, maybe the Silent King, command barges, and so on. And then finally we're going to be talking about like a merger, like a bit of a hybrid of one of those four that we've just mentioned. So there's actually 5 I'm going to be talking about today in this video. So stick around, like, subscribe and all that stuff. Let's get into the identity to begin with. So when it comes to the Necron's Identity, we need to understand what our identity is. Reanimation protocols is an obvious go-to here, being able to restore wounds to a unit, bringing back models during the game. That makes Necrons much harder to remove once they've taken ground. Playstyles also mainly focus around holding the board, taking objectives early and keeping them through durability, not so much through raw damage, mainly durability. Thirdly, in my opinion, Necrons work best at a steady tempo. Some people do like to literally rush forward, depending on the detachment and the units that you've got in your list, but most of the units like a steady approach, pushing forward, recovering and keeping pressure on your opponent turn after turn, trying to make use of our reanimation protocols. I know we've already mentioned it a couple of points ago. One of the good things we've got about reanimation protocols, even though I don't like it as an ability, I've said it in the last few videos now, but the one good thing we do have is at least we get to decide what your opponent can target. Even though your opponent gets to decide what they're going to go for, we can kind of rotate units if we really wanted to. 1 minute some immortals are sticking out, they get hurt, they get back into cover, and then we stick some Lich Guard out, forcing your opponent to keep changing their target so they're not focusing down, unless of course you completely lose a unit. That's a whole different ballgame. Now for most of these approaches, Necron Warriors, Immortals and Wraiths form the foundation of your army, whilst Overlords and Cryptex are going to be boosting nearby units with repairs, buffs and rerolls. We're also relying on synergy, because units become far stronger when supported by characters and auras, keeping them alive and keeping them much more effective. That could be synergy coming from the Silent King, the Command Barge, and again those Overlords and Cryptex. Now whilst we're not the fastest faction in the game, Necrons do still have a lot of movement tools, and very good ones as well. And not just tools, not just enhancement, but we've got some units that can be quite rapid. I mean, those Tomb Blades are pretty good. The Monoliths with their Eternity Gate can move a unit or two around. And going back to the enhancements, the Veil of Darkness as an example, we've got that as well. Right, the Silvertide Approach. This is focused on mass infantry that floods the board with bodies, and you're going to be relying on overlapping support to stay alive. Now it's a traditional Necron method going back to the early editions, so you're going to be overwhelming the midboard through resilience rather than speed, rather than alpha strike damage. Now the core of this force is going to be revolving around Necron Warriors backed up with Royal Wardens and Orokin the Diviner, or chronomancers. Warriors, there's a lot of bodies there. All of them have OC2. If you've got Orokin the Diviner in the mix, that's a 4+ invulnerable save to those 20 bodies. And the Royal Warden being able to allow the unit to fall back and still shoot, and fall back and still charge. And you can even just make use of that movement as well. So once you're stuck in engagement range, you're not going to be moving around. One for the durability and one for the repositioning and being able to still fire. Fantastic. Now we can also mention Immortals. I would ideally put Chronomancers here because the Chronomancer not only gives them the -1 to hit ability, it's like stealth but works in melee and at range, but also you've got that ability to be able to move after shooting when you've got a Chronomancer in the unit. So that can reposition your Immortals safely because there's only like 5 or 10 in the unit, so you don't want to lose them. They do go down quite quick even though they're toughness 5 with the 3-up save. You want to be able to fire and then duck. Keep them out of sight, keep them out of range, keep them behind a terrain feature so your opponent literally cannot see them to fire at them. Alternatively, you can use it to gain more ground to get onto an objective. That may be sacrificial for your Immortals, but maybe that's your game plan. Maybe you've only got 5 in the unit with a Chronomancer, so it's something you could do to score. Maybe it's a secondary such as extended battle lines, for example, or area denial, something like that. You can use your Immortals in that manner. Lichguard or another unit for the Silvertide Approach. You're going to be sticking a Noble in the unit for the -1 to wound them with Guardian Protocols. Yeah, they're going to be literally bunkering down on an objective, getting their shields up. You never take the War Scythes. Until they fix the War Scythes, the amount of attacks they get, you just never take War Scythes. They're just not durable enough to sustain any damage, and they will go down before they get into a fight because they're only moving 5 inches. So you stick a Noble in there, stick the shields in there with the Hyperphase Swords, bunker down on objectives, get your OC going. All of these units alone, the Warriors, Immortals, the Lichguard, on their own or with their leaders on their own, if you know what I mean, that's not enough for Silvertide. For the Silvertide to work, you need a lot more synergy, a lot more. So for example, you need Ghost Arcs, so you can be able to use your reanimation protocols on your Necron Warriors out of turn. You want to be bringing Resurrection Orbs, that could be an Overlord or it could be a Catacomb Command Barge. Bringing those Resurrection Orbs to be able to, again, use reanimation protocols out of turn, out of sequence. Canoptic Reanimators are an absolute must in my opinion when you're playing Silvertide, to be able to be getting your reanimation protocols off double bubble, basically a +D3, and that's going to apply to Resurrection Orbs, that's going to apply to, maybe it's the Protocol of Undying Legions in the Awakened Dynasty, where you're going to be, again, spending a CP to do reanimation out of turn, out of sequence. All of these combined, all of this synergy combined is going to make this castle of a Silvertide fortress very hard to shift. And if you've got them in the right location on the battlefield, on the objectives, scoring points win your games at the end of the day. Now the next approach is what I've called the durable approach. Unlike the Silvertide's resilience on layered synergy, this approach values independent durability and flexible striking power. Now each unit can function on its own if needed, a step away from the Silvertide, which kind of really does rely heavily on all the synergy around it. These units that I'm about to mention in this chapter don't necessarily need all the synergy from other units. So in this durable approach, you're going to be building this around elite formations. They're going to be tough enough to take a beating, but also strong enough to putting out some output offensively at the same time. Canoptic Wraiths are an easy go-to here. Of course, you're going to add that Technomancer for the 5+ Feel No Pain save. They've already got the 4+ Invulnerable save. The Technomancer is going to be healing them. There's a lot of nice synergy that's all in-house, all within their own unit. They don't need to rely on other units to help them. Lichguard, again, I'm going to be bringing them back even though they are one of the options for the Silvertide approach. I would also put them here because they're quite elite. You could follow the Lichguard up behind the Wraiths as a second wave potentially, supporting overlords or named characters within that unit, again holding objectives. Maybe it allows those Canoptic Wraiths to move on once the enemy units have been defeated, because the Lichguard have kind of backed them up. Trike Stalkers and Catan Shards are more options for that mid-range firepower and area control, pushing units that want to contest objectives away from them by using our range as well as our melee output, while being pretty resilient. I mean, the Catan in general are very resilient with all their Feel No Pains and Invuln saves and halving damage, and the Trike Stalkers not as resilient. The toughness is okay, the 4+ Invuln is fine, but they're quite cheap. I mean, for the price of Catan, you could, not quite, but you could nearly get like 3 Trike Stalkers, and they've all got Scout as well, don't forget. They've all potentially got the Heat Ray with the Melter or Torrent, so Very useful, pretty sturdy units that can almost be a blockage as well. You're not only pushing enemies off of objectives, but you're potentially blocking them from getting back on them whilst we're still scoring points. I've gone with Locust Destroyers with a Locust Lord, as well as Scorbit Destroyers with a Scorbit Lord. Depends on, if you want to go down the melee route or the shooty route. They're both very similar. Like I said, one does shooting, one does melee. They're not as durable, don't get me wrong. Not as durable as Wraiths, but they do hit hard and literally do eliminate targets. If your Locust Destroyers are focusing down on a certain unit and they've got all their buffs, it's the closest enemy unit, and they're on an objective so you get to reroll your stuff, that's going to be brutal with their lethal hits. And the same applies with the Scorbit Destroyers. If you jump them into melee with a Scorbit Lord, lethal hits, mortals on the charge, rerolling hits, devastating wounds with a plasma sight, they will literally both these units will massively end your opponent's focus on a certain objective. They really will. So this formation being about controlled pressure, striking first, using the Wraiths or the Trike Stalkers to disrupt, and then rotating those heavier hitters to literally finish off the targets. So this is a balanced, adaptable strike force because none of these units need to synergize with each other. The Catan doesn't need to synergize with the Locust Destroyers, and neither of those need to synergize with a Lich Guard unit or the Canoptic Wraiths and so on. So this is very different to the Silvertide, which does rely on the synergy from other units nearby. Now, where the durable approach wins through positioning and melee control, the mobility approach wins through speed, teleportation and unpredictability. It's a playstyle of reaction and redeployment, striking wherever your opponent leaves a weakness. Now, the Hypercrypt Legion is a very obvious go-to for this kind of approach, and it really does define the playstyle in fact, because you're enabling teleportation and redeploys literally throughout your entire army, your entire list. Everyone all of a sudden can do hyperphasing. Monoliths are also a big mainstay because of their Eternity Gate, to be bringing in reinforcements or pulling units away from danger, but that can also be used as an offense rather than a defense, because maybe you just want to move a brick of warriors from one side of the battlefield to the other. That could be really aggressive because now all of a sudden you've got 20 Ghost Reapers in range of a really hard unit to shift with their lethal hits, and you've all of a sudden got 40 odd OC in a certain location. Ophidian Destroyers, they've got deep strike, so they can deep strike into weak spots, forcing your opponent to literally split their focus, but also they can retunnel, use their tunneling horrors, go back into deep striking reserves, and come back in a newer weak spot later in the game. Knight Scythe, some people like the Knight Scythes. I'm not a massive fan, but they do provide that fast delivery and fire support in turn 1. So you're going to be inserting troops into far-flung objectives that you can't necessarily reach. And I've gone with Tomb Blades as well because they've got a lot of mobility. They've got stealth if you chose the right war gear, of course. And their ability to move after shooting is massive. It keeps them safe so you can duck back into cover. Or you can use it as a scoring mechanism. And because it's got Assault, you're going to be moving, you're going to be advancing, you're going to be still firing because Tesla has Assault. And then because you fired, you get to move even further, and you could be using that for your secondaries. Maybe it's something like behind enemy lines, maybe it's something like engage on all front, and you needed these Tomb Blades to get into a certain area of the battlefield that other units in your list simply couldn't get to. Maybe you're not playing the Hypercrypt Legion, so you weren't able to do it. So those Tomb Blades can be a very good tool to be scoring those secondary cards. And then you've got things like, the Veil of Darkness from the Awakened Dynasty. It mimics the detachment's freedom because you're allowing certain units to be redeployed mid-battle, and that's outside of the Hypercrypt Legion. Again, a lot of this is Hypercrypt stuff, and in the Hypercrypt Legion you can do it kind of at all times, but if you're not playing the Hypercrypt Legion, you're playing the Awakened Dynasty, you're less mobile, so you do rely a little bit more on the deep strike units that can only come in once, or Ophidian Destroyers that can keep going in and out, or Tomb Blades, or the Veil of Darkness, of course. And then finally we're going with the vehicle heavy approach. So where the mobility approach relied on sudden movement and flexible positioning, this strategy replaces speed with armor, endurance and firepower. A network of vehicles supporting each other under precise command. So the obvious centerpiece for this kind of list or this kind of approach would be the Silent King. He's the centerpiece with all of his aura abilities, with the trike abilities, making nearby vehicles highly effective, highly efficient as gunline units. Now, of course, this is going to marry up very nicely with the Star Shatter Arsenal. I didn't want to name this chapter the Star Shatter Arsenal because then it would just be detachment playstyles rather than actual playstyles, because you can still go down the court, you can still take the avenue of the Hypercrypt Legion and be vehicle heavy. There's nothing wrong with taking 3 Annihilation Barges, 3 Triumph Stalkers, 3 Command Barges in the Hypercrypt Legion. It might not be the most meta way of playing, but there's nothing wrong with that. They're still quite durable units at the end of the day, and if you're hyperphasing these things in, and Doomsday Arcs as well, they're still going to be quite difficult to shift, and now they've got that mobility. The detachment isn't as relevant, but the Star Shatter Arsenal, of course, would be quite nice to merge into this playstyle. Command Barges for the same reason, offering mobile leadership that could potentially boost accuracy with the right enhancements. It can increase your OC, especially Canoptic Scarabs that don't have any OC. Triumph Stalkers again, they form a backbone of an advanced mid-range walkers that are providing reliable anti-tank fire and targeting support for an entire formation. So you're going to be ignoring cover as soon as you've hit with one of your ranged weapons, and that's going to of course aid all of your other units. Annihilation Barges, they're adding more volume to your firepower, suppressing infantry and light armor while shifting fire lanes while needed, because they've got the speed as well as, even though they're like a gun platform effectively, they've still got that speed of a Necron vehicle, and they've still got that durability of a Necron vehicle with their toughness 8 and a 4+ invulnerable save. Canoptic Spiders are a definite must-have if you're going down this approach, because they're going to be enhancing your survivability of your vehicles, because they're going to add that Fear No Pain save to every single wound that you take to your vehicles. There's a 6+ Fear No Pain save if you are within close proximity of a Canoptic Spider, and if it's mortal wounds or psychic attacks, it's going to be a 5+, so very useful. And the Canoptic Spiders themselves are pretty good offensively as well. They've got the double particle blasters, they've got the vicious claws or the Canoptic Spider claws, so they can do a bit as well, and even if you're not using them that aggressively, they can still be an action monkey. So spiders are a definite go-to in this kind of approach. So the vehicle heavy approach wins through superior durability and coordinated firepower, breaking enemy lines not through speed, but through unrelenting strength and precision. Then we come on to the hybrid approach, which is a little bit of a mix of all of them. I just wanted to throw this in at the end because I can see it in the comments already. Well, I play a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other one. And yeah, of course you can hybrid all of this, and that's probably where the most meta lists come from. You stick, you get your Canoptic Race and your Technomancer, but you also get your Silent King and your Doomsday Arcs, and you also get some, some Lich Guard or whether, and that's kind of meta building. So having a hybrid is probably the best way to go if you're going to tournaments. But I kind of want to know what your playstyle is. Out of these 4 or 5 playstyles, what's yours? Let me know down in the comments. I'm going to number the chapters so that you can just put the number in the comments if you want. I might even do a poll. But yeah, let me know. And if there's any other playstyles, also let me know down below. It'd be quite fascinating to have a read up on what you guys think. But guys, that is today's video all done and dusted. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.